All right, let's dive into a story that honestly sounds like it was ripped straight out of a horror film. We're talking about Flakka, a drug that just exploded into the news with these wild tales of superhuman strength, bizarre behavior, and even cannibalism. Yeah, it got nicknamed the zombie drug. But how much of that is just media hype, and what's the actual science behind it? Well, to figure that out, we have to start with the headlines that kicked off the whole panic. I mean, this quote really captures the terror that was surrounding Flakka at its peak. This wasn't some quiet little issue. It was making major headlines with stories that just seemed completely unbelievable. And these weren't just isolated rumors. We're talking about shocking events that left police and doctors scrambling for answers. It really set the stage for a nationwide panic. So that's the big question we're tackling here. Are these so-called zombie episodes a terrifying reality of this drug? Or was it all just media hype that spun out of control? To find out, we've got to separate the myths from the medicine and the headlines from the actual chemistry. And that's exactly what we're about to do. Okay, so let's start by pulling back the curtain on the myth itself. Before we can even get to the biology, we need to understand the chemistry. What is this stuff that got stuck with such a terrifying reputation? Here's our starting point. The drug's real name is alpha-pyrrolidinopantheonone. Yeah, don't worry, you don't have to remember that. We'll just call it alpha-PVP. It's what's known as a synthetic cathinone. So think of cathinone as a natural stimulant that you'd find in the cat plant over in East Africa. What chemists did was take that natural blueprint and create a super powerful, totally synthetic, and way more dangerous version in a lab. Now, this clears up something a lot of people get confused about. You've probably heard the term bath salts, right? That was kind of the catch-all street name for the first wave of these drugs. Flakka, or alpha-PVP, is more specific. It's a second-generation version. And that difference really matters, because this new version was way more potent and created a crisis that was entirely its own. A huge part of why Flakka spread like wildfire was just how easy it was to get. It looked like gravel, and get this, it was only $4 or $5 a dose. It was dangerously cheap. That combination of a low price and an incredibly powerful high allowed it to just tear through communities with devastating speed. So we know what Flakka is and where it came from, but how does it turn a person into a so-called zombie? Well, the answer is in the violent chemical storm it unleashes inside the human brain. This process right here, it explains everything. So in your brain, you get a release of pleasure chemicals like dopamine, and then they get reabsorbed pretty quickly. It's a nice, balanced system. But Flakka just crashes that system. As you can see there in step 3, it acts like a giant dam, totally blocking those chemicals from being reabsorbed. The result, in step 4, is that all that dopamine just builds and builds and builds, completely flooding the brain and creating this out-of-control, terrifying stimulant effect. To put that into perspective for you, researchers have said that this effect is like taking a powerful hit of meth and cocaine at the exact same time. So it's not just a stimulant, it's a complete neurological hijacking that pushes your brain's alert system into a state of extreme, dangerous overdrive. And that neurological hijacking has absolutely devastating consequences. It creates this rapid downward spiral for the user, taking them from that initial feeling of euphoria into a state of pure delirium. This is where the chemistry turns into the horrifying behavior that made all those headlines. This slide really shows the tragic bargain of Flakka. Over on the left, you've got the promise, that intense high, the energy that users are chasing. But because of that chemical storm we just talked about, that experience almost always spirals into the peril you see on the right. Extreme paranoia, terrifying hallucinations, and a complete psychotic break with reality. And this isn't just a mental crisis. The body is in a state of absolute emergency too. First, you've got hyperthermia. That means body temperature skyrockets to deadly levels. We're talking 105, 106 degrees. Then there's tachycardia, where the heart is just beating dangerously fast, pushing it right to its limit. And maybe the scariest one is rhabdomyolysis. This is where the body is under so much stress that muscle tissue literally starts to break down, flooding the body with toxins and causing the kidneys to fail. So here it is. This is the scientific answer to the zombie myth. When you combine that intense psychosis with that extreme body heat, you get a recognized medical emergency called excited delirium. And this explains everything. The body is burning up, so they rip off their clothes. The mind is gripped by paranoid hallucinations, so they become aggressive. And the adrenaline is pumping so hard they don't feel pain, which creates that illusion of superhuman strength. It's not a zombie virus. It's a tragic and horrifyingly predictable physiological meltdown. And that meltdown wasn't happening in just a handful of isolated cases. It grew into a full-blown public health crisis with truly deadly consequences. The statistics that came out of this period are just staggering. Look at this number, 60. That's 60 deaths in just one county in Florida, Broward County, over the course of the crisis. And these weren't just simple overdoses. These were deaths from accidents, suicides, and homicides, all fueled by the drug's effects. And this chart shows you the scale of what the emergency services were dealing with. On a normal day, they might see 1 or 2 cases. But at the height of the Flakka epidemic, they were treating up to 30 overdoses a day. Hospitals were just completely swamped. And while Florida was ground zero, this was very much a global problem. Forensic reports show deaths linked to alpha PVP all over the world. In Japan, you see sudden heart failure. In Poland, deadly cocktails with other drugs. In Finland, accidental deaths like drowning. And all across the US, suicides and homicides. This was a worldwide threat. So, in response to all this, the DEA classified alpha PVP as a Schedule I substance. That's the highest level of control a drug can have. It's basically reserved for things with a huge potential for abuse and absolutely no legitimate medical purpose. It's the government's official stamp saying this chemical is incredibly dangerous. So the big Flakka panic has largely subsided now, thanks to some serious law enforcement action here and in China, where a lot of it was being made. But it leaves us with a really chilling question, doesn't it? Flakka was just one chemical, one wave in this huge ocean of new synthetic drugs. In a world where chemists can constantly invent new, unknown, and briefly legal substances, the real question isn't just about what Flakka was, it's about what the next Flakka will be.